in 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to the SEAOC webinar. You are welcome to use the chat feature to share information or ideas with your fellow attendees. Click the chat bubble at the bottom of your screen to open the chat window, and we will begin the webinar shortly.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank you for joining us and welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Bernard Cruz. I am the co-chair of the Continuing Education Committee for SEAOC, along with Joyce Fuss, who should be joining us as well today. Today's presenters put together a really detailed presentation for you. If you have a question, I'll go over some housekeeping rules here before we get started. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You click on that, type in your questions. I'll keep track of them and keep our moderators up to speed on what you're sending in as far as questions, and we'll take care of them as the moderator sees fit. And I'll pose them to them throughout the presentation and at the end. If you're having difficulty accessing the webinar, please email seaoc@seaoc.org or call 415-764-4822 for assistance by a member of the SEAOC staff. Another note is that today's webinar will be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel for SEAOC within about a week. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our topic today. It is what to expect from the new CBT, computer-based testing PE structural engineering exam by NCEES. Okay. This webinar will provide information to help you navigate the new CBT format. So for example, we'll help you understand the changes, including the testing at sites similar to those used for the NCEES PE exam. You'll learn from exam insights. Our panelists recently took the exam, so they're hoping to share some insight with you. We'll talk about the pass rate for lateral and vertical path depth exams from this past spring and how you can prepare for common pitfalls. We'll also help you prepare for the challenging schedule. As we all know, the testing environment is pretty tough, and the multi-day experience can be pretty grueling and difficult to schedule, especially since the depth exams are only available during certain times of the year. Lastly, our gracious panelists are volunteering their time to provide real-world tips from their recent experiences of taking the test. So you'll get to hear firsthand from a panel of individuals who recently taken the exam. They'll share non-technical insights about what to expect on exam day, from navigating the testing center to managing nerves and pacing yourself to help you ensure success. So now let me introduce our moderator for today's talk. That's Michael Parolini. He's a principal at Bueller and a part-time lecturer at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He is the chair of the SEAOC Licensure Committee, as well as a member of the NCSEA Structural Licensure Committee representing California. He's a passionate guy about the value of licensure and protecting the health and welfare of the public and the growth of emerging engineers. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thank you, Bernard. Appreciate it. Let's start out. This isn't about me so much. Let's start out with our topic. You kind of hit that really well. Let's jump over to our panelists in our next spot. So our panelists today, we have Colin Foxley with HED out of San Diego. We have Jack Wegleitner out of Dagen-Kolb in San Francisco. James Gaitan, the Arab in San Francisco. Joanna Sanchez Nunez with Bueller in Los Angeles. And Ryan Smith with Kaufman Engineers in San Diego. As Bernard said, everybody here has recently taken, at a minimum, the CBT exam in April and in various parts. Ryan has a unique perspective because he has taken both the paper and pencil exam last fall before it changed over in April, and then taken the CBT exam as well. Fun little calculator preference hole on the bottom. Joanna and James like to go back to the multi-line TI 84. Hopefully you have your favorite calculator as well. It's always fun to see our different ones. The thing we found about our group here is that we're all TI friendly and nobody uses HPs. So no reverse Polish in this crew, but if that's you, more power to you. Quick agenda for today. We have our intro. We're going to talk about a couple of quick facts about the exam, quick facts about NCEES and how we got to CBT. I know Bernard covered a couple of those things, and then we'll go into our panel discussion and our Q&A. So really, really detailed agenda today. We're just going quick intro, panel, and then we're going to have our Q&A topics at the end. We've picked some frequently asked questions that hopefully answer some of the things that end up on the board here. So let's talk about a quick disclaimer to start. What this webinar is nothing technical, right? This webinar is here to discuss the exam logistics, particularly in the cases of using CBT and NCEES, partnering with Pearson VUE for that administration of the exam. It's not about what's on the exam, questions, topics, those kind of things, as you would expect. That is very, very high security stuff and nothing that we would be sharing in a public forum such as this. So if you have concerns or questions about the technical content related in the exam itself, you can definitely visit ncees.org, navigate to the exams and down to the CBT structural portion of the exam, and there'll be an exam outline or specification explaining what's actually on the exam and what topics to go over. They have a breakdown of that on there if you've never seen it. All right. So quick discussion about what structural engineering is as a whole. Structural engineering is, as I put there in the very first topic, it's a profession of lifelong learning. We have to be committed as structural engineers to continuing to grow, continuing to meet the needs and protection that the public expects by continually being better and gaining technical knowledge as we go through our careers. We can't just stop learning at some point. That makes for a tough look as a profession as a whole. We want to make sure that our value is provided out to the public. How do we do that? Well, structural engineering is is, like I said there a minute ago, right, is technical knowledge and professional behaviors. There's a topic of that there somewhere, and we can have a whole discussion of the value of structural engineering at a different time. But the way we demonstrate to the public and the way we are keep track of that is the three-legged stool of education, experience, and examination, also known as the 3 E's, right? And so what we're here to talk about today really is the side of things. I assume most everybody who's interested in this has already been past the education side and moving in through, or at some portion through, the experience side. And really what we care about is that third leg of the stool, which is the examination side. We're going to talk about the logistics related to that. You know, the discussion of accredited schools or experience and all those things is a whole different side of things. We're talking about examination today. So NCEES structural exam, PE structural exam, I'm sorry, different from the PE civil exam that most everybody who's at this level in California, being a post-PE state, has already passed that side of things, or is in a process of that, looking forward to the SE side of things. The portion or the topic here also is that it's very important to note is that it's a national consensus exam, meaning that it's created by all member boards. They empower NCEES to create this exam, to be written this exam and everybody accepts what the results of these exams are. So the other thing that being on a national exam schedule versus the California schedule allows a little more flexibility of engineers who practice in multiple states going back and forth, because it's recognized across the entire, I don't say United States because not all member boards are states in this case, some are territories, et cetera. There are 4 separate parts. I'm sure you're pretty well aware of this, but there is the vertical side and the lateral side in both the breadth and the depth side of things. So 4 separate parts. It used to be that it was in 2 parts. You had a lateral side and a vertical side in the 16-hour exam, which was retired at the end of October of last year. Now it's in 4 separate parts. The depth exams themselves, as we know, are only offered on certain days of the year. Vertical and lateral depth exams are offered in April and October. The October exam, if you're scheduled for it, is coming up very quickly, and we wish you the absolute best of luck on that. The computer-based examination through Pearson VUE is important to note because it's the very similar situation to what you've probably been exposed to, maybe if you've taken a lead exam, or if you've taken the PE civil structural exam previously for the 8-hour exam, national exam portion of the California PE exam. The depth exam has alternative item types. If you want to know more about them, definitely go on the NCEES YouTube channel. There's about a 2-minute video that will explain and show you some of these options, but using multiple select, drag and drop, fill in the blank, and point and click kind of things versus a typical multiple choice where it's just, you know, 4 answers, pick the right one, and you move on from there, which would be standard for the breadth exams. It's important to note that there's, you know, drag and drop can be, they'll explain, can be ranking, can be ordering things, all those kind of things would be great. So in your chat, you'll find a link to about 14 YouTube videos that are helpful for understanding how this exam is formatted and what it might look like when you actually get there. I know one of the topics that most people are been made aware of when you go to a computer-based exam is that with the exam no longer being paper and pencil and written out answers, then you also don't have written out solutions that you can get partial credit for, or things, you know, maybe someone understanding the process you were going through, maybe you divided by 2 wrong, maybe you were on the right path, maybe you're able to write out, I would have checked shear, whatever that might have been. As you run out of time, you can't do that on a computer-based exam where you're clicking and pointing. Well aware of that. I don't know the statistics behind it, but I can point out that the old exams in the scenarios usually had, you know, 3 to 6 parts to them in the different scenarios, and there were multiple steps built into there. The new scenarios maybe have more. They're broken down in a little more pieces. So that 1 or a 0, the partial credit portion, is a little bit different, and it's understood and known and built in the statistics behind all of the exam and the way it's administered. I can't say much about that because I don't know much about it, and it's not something that's published by NCEES, so you won't have the opportunity to know that. But just, I know that's a big topic It is true. It's not a rumor. Partial credit is no longer available on the alternative item types because it is a computer graded exam. All right, let's talk about some of the new benefits of the exam. One of the things we don't have here is the ability to schedule it kind of whenever you want to, minus the death exams. We'll get into that in a second. You can take the breadth exams all year round, the multiple choice, whenever you feel like it, whenever it works out for you, whenever it's gone. You don't have the old scenario where like old guys like me and others that had to, plan for that October or that April time, and you had that one opportunity across the entire state. So you can do it at various times, works out great. In addition to that, there's no rolling timeline for successful passing for each individual sections. There's 4 sections, the depth and breadth of both the lateral and vertical. And now you can pass those all individually. It used to be that like if you had a successful passing score on the multiple choice portion in the morning, but you didn't on the written exam in the afternoon, you had to take the whole vertical section over again. That's not the case anymore. Now, if you're successful on the alternative item types, the depth exams, and maybe you don't do well in the multiple choice, the breadth exam on a different time, you can take them and pass them individually. And that rolling timeline of 5 years is now removed. So you could pass 3 exams this year, and 25 years from now, pass the 4th exam, successful completion of the examination. So I don't recommend that path, but you could definitely do it. Elephant in the room, passing rate, April 2024 exam. I know our first question here in the webinar is it still going to be 14 to 16% on the depth exams? The passing rate for the breadth exams was about half, a little more than that, plus or minus for both the vertical and the lateral, in the 50% range. For the breadth or for the depth exams, the alternative item types exams for the lateral and vertical sections, they were 14 and 16% respectively. That seems low. What I'm going to, and I know that's what has been said across the board, there is no set pass rate for the exam. They don't go in there, and then when the psychometricians go in and figure out all the pass rates, and they do a cut, they set the cut score and all that. They don't pick, we're only going to pass 20%, or we're only going to pass 30%, or we want this many to pass. That's not how that works. It's 100% when they set the cut score and they take the exam, and they have people set what a reasonable and minimally competent engineer would pass on these exam that was put forward. That's how they set that. Okay, so it's very important to keep that in mind. There's no set score that they pick. It's set up that way. The other thing to note for this exam, and this may be little comfort for those that took it, but I do want to point out the very positive side of that. This was an exam change, a format change from paper and pencil to computer-based testing. And the computer-based testing side of things, this is we're the very last test to do it. Everything else has already done it. Geotechnical, nuclear, civil, everything, mechanical, all been computer-based testing for a while. This has been coming since 2011 when the decision was made. So this is 13 years in the making, plus or minus, for NCEES. This is a new exam format. And when you have a new exam format, everybody is a first-time test taker, whether or not you've taken the exam 30 or 1 time. So when that rate is produced and put out to the public, everybody is a first-time exam taker, and it's, for better or worse, repeat test takers. Okay, the more times you take it, the lower the number of people that pass. Okay, that pass rate goes down a little bit. So everybody being a first-time test taker would definitely help that exam to be a little lower. All right. All right, that's great. Thank you very much. Hopefully that helps a little bit and is a little bit of an explanation and gives you a little bit more positive thing. I think we will see that pass rate go up in October after this exam cycle, and as people get used to the new format, it will help out. So let's jump into our panel discussion and get away from just me talking. Would be great. So if my panelists can bring themselves up, and we'd be good to go. Let's start with topic number 1, scheduling of the exams. I heard it was difficult to schedule exams for the depth portions or finding a spot. Does anyone have any opinions about that and their experience?
Yeah, it's always good to schedule it early. But if there's something not available, I change my dates for some of them, some of the exams once or twice, and people there were dates became available or testing centers that were more convenient became later, as I continue to check. So if it's always good to schedule early, but if something's not available, feel free to keep on checking back and see if something becomes available later.
To build on James's point, uh, I scheduled my exam pretty early as a study tactic and a motivation tactic to get me to actually start planning it out, and I found that to be really effective. Also, if something looks weird on the actual scheduling portal, don't be afraid to email NCEES. There was a glitch when I was trying to sign up and it said there was no depth exams available anywhere at any time. And it turned out just to be something wrong on the back end, and they were quick to get back to me. So if something looks weird, don't panic. Maybe just reach out to NCES first.
And kind of one thought that I'd like to share is that if you are planning early and planning ahead, there may be a handful of test centers to select between. I found value in actually Google reviews and Yelp reviews for the different Pearson VUE locations, and you may be able to get a tidbit of knowledge of a pro and a con that may help you select a slightly further location than a slightly closer location. So definitely take advantage of your resources that are out there as you're selecting your venue.
All good topics there. We can move on to topic 2. How to best navigate the Pearson VUE test centers. Some of the difficulties and challenges you saw happen, or things that you ran into yourselves.
I'll start. I think a big piece that people may be unaware of is the ability to arrive early at the testing centers. The exam may start at 8 a.m. or whatever your start time may be. The reality is there's a handful and a lot of other individuals there that may also have start times at the same time, and they only administer one person at a time from my experience. In that case, if you show up at 7:55 for an 8 a.m. exam, you may be the 10th person in the queue, and you may not end up starting your test till 8:45 or so if you had an 8 a.m. start time. So if you're the kind of person that wants to just get in and get out, there's no harm or no foul to show up early and have the opportunity to kind of be in a shorter queue and just get it right in and maybe even start the exam early.
Another
Maybe
thing
one.
oh,
Oh,
you
go
can
ahead,
Jack.
James.
Okay. I'll go. Another thing that I found useful was that I think on Pearson's website they said they could provide earplugs, but they weren't always offered to me. But I did see them there, and I asked if they could give me some because that helped block out a lot of sound. They also have like headphones that can block out the sound, but they weren't the most comfortable, so I personally preferred using the earplugs. Heard some noises, heard some other people, heard some chatter while they were taking an exam that would not want to get distracted by.
One other thing I would add is they don't count on there being any food options close by. You get a little locker when you get to the Pearson VUE Center, and everything you brought goes in the locker. So maybe bring a small snack and water, but the test room is a sterile environment, so you can't bring any of that into the room. And then the breaks, which I think we'll get to later, are pretty short. So even if there's a vending machine there, it may take a little while. So I think it's good to just have everything you think you might need during a break in the locker.
James, did you have an experience with the proctor itself making a mistake with other people in front of you? Maybe you can share that experience.
Yeah, if they're telling you the wrong exam, just make sure you clarify with them and advocate for yourself. Make sure they're giving you the right amount of time and confirm that they're actually giving you the right test. I think with it being a new exam, some people might have gotten confused with the national PE exam rather than the PE structural breadth or depth.
That's right. The aptly named PE structural exam and the PE civil structural exam are very close together, and we can't expect proctors sometimes to know exactly what's going on. They should have that record, but when they do issue the wrong thing, I think, James, your experience was that they told people they had 8 hours to take the exam, and that's not the case for each portion of the exam. 5.5 hours for a breadth and 5 hours for a depth exam, correct? Yeah. Don't get excited when they accidentally give you 8. That's not a good idea. Is this the spot where we take the opportunity to talk about the writing utensils and some of our further topics about the similar to the PE civil structural? We get the dry erase marker piece or the permanent marker piece. Maybe you guys can speak some of that, some of your tips and topics that you found helpful.
Sure, I'll go ahead and jump in. Yeah, so you get to start, you can't take in your own materials like previously done in the written exam version. So you can't take your own material and can't take your own paper and pencils, writing utensils, but they do provide booklets that are like a whiteboard material and whiteboard markers. On the booklets, you can't erase after you've written something. So I'd recommend kind of just organizing the space that you're taking for all the questions. They do give you a couple booklets, and if you use up all the sheets, you can swap one out. But I believe if you trade in a used booklet for a fresh one, you aren't able to get that old one back. So if you wanted to check back your answers or something like that, you wouldn't be able to look at any of your work that you had already given back to the proctor. And then for the whiteboard markers, if they only give you one, I would recommend asking for a couple backups. That way, if you're in the middle of writing a problem and the ink runs out or something, you've got a couple other options and don't have to wait until you need another marker to ask for one.
A quick note on asking for multiple markers. I also found it helpful to stand all the markers up with the pen tip down so that the ink can go to the bottom, so you don't have to try to scribble around to try and get the marker to work. But they are pretty quick generally about bringing you a new marker if all of the ones they gave you initially run out. Might take a minute or two because you have to raise your hand. But once they notice you, they'll bring you a new marker.
Yeah, I think you actually brought up a good point there at the tail end of that comment there, Jack, that there is a system in place at the Pearson VUE test centers, and don't expect that when you have a question or an issue or need to step out for a sip of water or something, that it's going to be instantaneous. Try to keep working through any sort of distraction you may have while your hand's up, because they may take 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes to come address you or respond to your hand in the air.
Yeah, just to add on to that, going in and outside of the testing actual room is a process. So they'll actually check your pockets if you have a jacket or pants with pockets, and then if you wear glasses, they'll want to look at those. And so each time, the initial going in and then for breaks, just expect some time there.
Great. All right. Let's jump in and talk about single monitors and the depth exams. Maybe some of the competitions or the differences between the breadth and the depth exams. We're used to probably the breadth format because of the PE civil structural exam, but the depth exams in particular.
I personally hadn't done the national PE online before, but I thought the breadth wasn't too bad in doing the split screen. The codes do sometimes lag and take a moment to load pages, which can be a challenge, but just to be aware of that, it's, yeah, need to know the sections a little bit better to not just scroll through a bunch of pages of the code. The depth was a little more challenging because on one side of the screen is the question, and then on the other side is like either the code or the scenario, and there's a lot of diagrams provided for the scenario, a lot of pages of diagrams. So that's an additional challenge, but just something to be aware of that. I think most of us are probably used to working on multiple screens and splitting things between a bunch of screens, but you have at least 3 documents for the depth that you need to be constantly referencing, and only one screen. So yeah, I think that's something useful to be aware of.
Yeah, and I think the other thing pertaining to the codes in the single monitor and kind of the lag time there that James alluded to is the fact that each of these codes are broken out differently. ACI may be tabbed or have bookmarks in a different manner than AISC. And with that being said, once you open up the different tabs within, so let's say you're opening an ACI and you have a bookmark for all the different chapters, you can only Control F within the chapter that you click on. So to try to minimize the lag, I believe the computers have just made it so that each chapter is a file, or each bookmark is a file. So you can't be Control F-ing and finding something outside of that bookmark or outside of that file or outside of that chapter. Everything is broken down into smaller pieces.
And the minor clarification, I think we all use Control F pretty, I don't know, regularly to describe searching, but it's actually technically not Control F. There's like a search box, like a lot of those shortcuts you can't necessarily use. Same thing with page up, page down. So just to be aware that you'll be typing a question into a box rather than explicitly Control F-ing.
Yeah, nailed it. There's actually a great video on the NCEES YouTube channel. The link was shared in the chat of this webinar, where they actually walk through the hotkeys that are available and do work on their platforms.
And to add one more point about what is and isn't available for page navigation, there are no page numbers on the documents. So if you're studying off a code PDF beforehand and you try and remember that this table is on a certain page number, that you can't navigate the codes at the Pearson centers that way. So all just little things to be aware of to help you save time and not get flustered while navigating the resources as they're made available to you.
Michael, you're muted.
Yeah, Michael, you're muted.
What a Muppet. Okay. I tell you, I think we jumped into our next topic a little bit early, but that's okay. The advice on sharing about the references themselves, about the bookmarks associated with them, searching them. Sounds like it's not quite the same, but like Ryan, you noted to make sure and visit the link we shared about the NCEES available YouTube videos about what those hotkeys are and being aware. The laggy computers, James, you mentioned it. Was that everybody's experience? It's not so much laggy, so these are big files.
Yeah, I think it's fair to assume it just takes a couple seconds for each file that you want to open. It's not instantaneous.
Yeah, and if you're using the search feature for a fairly repetitive word in that code, it'll take a long time. You'll have a big result, kind of like a search engine to weed through. So the more specific you can be, may be useful.
Yeah. How much of a hindrance did you find not having your tabs and your books and your steel manual and that stuff available?
So I would say, because you can't have your own tabs and bookmarks, I would recommend really knowing what section things are within the codes. For one, because it takes a while to search things like the guys have mentioned. So taking less time to search for something because you know where it is very helpful, especially a couple things to point out. Within a reference, you can only have one reference open at the same time. So, you know, a lot of problems you might have to start in ASC 7, then you want to jump to the Steel manual. On the one split screen, you can only have one code open at a time. So there is some extra clicking back and forth. Occasionally, not always, but usually I found that if I went from one code to another one, when I returned to the first code, it typically saved what page I was looking at previously, which was very nice, but not always. So again, just knowing where exactly things are in the code and being able to find things quickly is a huge recommendation.
Perfect. Yeah. I know it's a big topic, not being able to bring your stuff in. And that's the piece of CBT that it's the exam security and what we give up for that purpose, right? So that's just kind of what it is. All right, let's talk about answering questions in order, flagging them to return, and the effect of breaks. And we kind of have a topic 7 about breaks as well. So let's talk about jumping back and forth to questions.
I'll start. So there's some details related to the breaks that, like Michael said, we'll touch on. But for the questions itself, you do have the option when you get to a question to flag it. And what that means is once you've at least opened and read every single question, you get this review window, which will show which questions you have answered or have not answered. But then it'll also have an actual flag for the ones that you've essentially bookmarked in case you already answered it, but maybe it's one that you wanted to kind of try to go back to just in case. And so it is this extra feature that I think is pretty cool, just to kind of track the questions that you want to pay special attention to at the end.
Yeah, and the breadth exam, the questions, the difficulty is somewhat like similar, like they only vary so much in difficulty, I think, like, you know, the same, they're all like 1 to 3 step questions basically. But in the depth, I found that there being a lot more of a variability, and with it averaging only 5 minutes per question, I think it's useful to think of that like test taking strategy that's often recommended for various tests of doing the questions you know first and then flagging to review for later. The Yeah, because of the bigger time constraint with the depth exams.
I think historically with the pen and paper, for those of us on the webinar that have taken the pen and paper exam, the difference here is no longer do you have this booklet you can quickly look at. I'm going to speak specifically maybe to the depth portion here. No longer can you quickly flip through and see what question number is what material type question. It seems to be a little bit clunkier to get through if you were to try to see all 60 pieces of the 5 scenarios to really identify where your question types are. It may just make the most sense to answer it in order, like this slide kind of mentions here as a test taking skill, just to not lose time, because time is so critical during this exam. And so yeah, I think the flagging is key. If you're stumped on one, just move on to the next, or if you see it is going to be a long time type item, jump and move on to the next.
Before we move on, I will note that a couple people have noted that the chat is disabled. We'll sort that out. And if not, the link that we keep mentioning will end up in the email summary on the end of this webinar as well. All right, let's talk about those breaks as we move forward into just like how those work and some of your best thoughts about, particularly in the depth side of and timing.
So to kick off the conversation around breaks, one thing that's important to note that isn't immediately clear when you sign up for the test is the test is split into two roughly halves, and every question on one side of the break needs to be answered and submitted before you take your break or even advance to the second half of the test. And you cannot go back and review your work, re-answer questions after you submit that first half of the test. The break is an optional break. You could just keep going. But I personally wouldn't recommend that. Having a little break was nice.
Yeah, and to add to what Jack said, you actually get to choose when you take that break. So you're essentially splitting the 5 or 5.5 hour exam into 2 sections when you choose. So if you were to look at the clock and the number of questions that it's given you, 24 or 29, try to find, I'd recommend trying to find a time on that countdown. It'll show you a countdown on the screen. Where you want to target to take that. It's not going to time each according to the length of or the number of questions. It's up to you. I think partly because it's an optional break, like Jack said.
Now, with that being said, am I correct that, and I'll ask the panelists here to respond, that just making sure that the portion 1 is a set number of questions, portion 2 is a set number of questions, and what you're alluding to was that you pick your own time to handle session 1 and session 2.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm getting head nods. So I think the important piece there is, let's say it's a 5-hour exam, and you have 2 scenarios, and then the forced or not the forced, the option of a break. Those 2 scenarios you can spend an hour and a half on, or you can spend 2.5 hours on, but you don't get any extra time for session number 2. That's taking out of your 5 hours total.
I think a couple of things to emphasize is once you've taken the break and finished the first portion of the exam, you can't, before you go on your break or skip the break, it'll basically warn you 2 to 3 times that you will not be able to see those questions again. So you'll just want to make sure that you make sure you've answered all the questions before you do kind of continue on to part 2. And likewise, you can't see what is coming up in the second half after the break during the first half. So just something to keep in mind. And the break itself, they give you 20 minutes, but that includes the time it takes for the proctor to take you out of the room, the security process. And if you're not in your seat when that 20-minute ends, the exam will start. And so that additional time that you're away from the computer breaks into your exam time. So just something to keep in mind with the timing.
Try to limit yourself to 15 minutes. It truly can take 2 to 3 to 4 minutes to get back in if there's someone else in front of you that's trying to get back into their exam as well.
Yeah, from my experience, I tried to eat lunch the first time I took the test. 15 minutes is not enough time. I would plan for maybe a bigger snack if you think you're going to be hungry or if your exam break comes around lunchtime, but definitely not enough time to go get food, let alone eat like a full meal and kind of calm down from the first part of the exam. So just take that all into account, like everyone was saying.
So getting Chipotle in between is not going to work out for you, huh? All right. Bring your queso with you. Be all right. Definitely a topic about getting in and out, making sure you're prepared, making sure you're in line, because that time will start again. There's been a lot of discussion actually in the chat about, or in the Q&A about computer pausing not being part of the total exam effort. I haven't heard that before. Have you guys seen that before? No, me neither.
Didn't notice it. It would have been on the order of magnitude of seconds,
Yeah.
probably. So I wasn't really looking at the clock in the second or two that the scrolling was lagging.
We can confirm that with NCEES and see if they know anything of Pearson VUE, but we don't have knowledge of that. Adding time back if the computer freezes up or is in the hourglass or the spinny waiting scenario. Good topic to follow up on. Let's go to our last topic, probably one of the most controversial topics that comes up, pretest questions. If you're not familiar with what a pretest question is, it's a question that you take on the exam that you're not graded for. So why are you taking that? You're taking that to build a bank of questions for NCEES to use in future examinations. As you know, right now, the breadth exams, the multiple choice, there's been multiple choice for a long time at this point, and there's a big bank of questions that they can choose from and use, and they can offer those exams year round. Right now, we talked about scheduling on very early in topic 1. Right now, for the depth exams, you can take it twice a year in April and October on certain days. They block out Pearson VUE centers, and everybody or most everybody going into those Pearson VUE centers on those days in the certain locations will be taking the depth exam, I'm sorry, for the lateral and vertical on their individual days. The goal is to get to a point where there's a bank of questions that can be offered and used all year round with the same general results, and you can take that whenever, so that you have this rolling time to take the exams always. There's not a large enough bank of questions to happen at that time, so you have pretest questions, and you're constantly retiring old multiple choice questions. That's why you have pretest questions on the multiple choice breadth exams and the alternative item types depth exams. The topic then takes it from a 4-hour exam to a 5-hour exam, or a 4-hour exam to a 5.5-hour exam. It's all available. This information is available on the NCEES website to have. We're not trying to sneak anything past you, but from a panelist and people that have actually taken the exam, pretest questions, they're marked with a little asterisk or a highlight in some way on the exam, so you know not to spend extra time on it. Or how's that work?
There's no way to know if it's pretest, and it's probably not worthwhile wondering if it is or not. Just answer every question to the best of your ability and hope that the ones you don't know are pretest, but again, no way to know.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to what James said, even if you see a typo in a question, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a pretest question. Treat every question like it's a real question and do your best. And if you get frustrated, there's a bunch of other questions on the test, so just move on to the next one.
Right, absolutely. I say in jest that they're highlighted. You are exactly correct. There's no way to know. And I think, James, you hit it on the head. I know this is a big topic out there, and we get this question quite a bit at the licensure committee, like, why are these here? What's going on? That's regardless. Right now, they're there, and they're there for you to take the exam as a whole, and assume they're all available to you, and just focus on pouring out the knowledge that you have to show that technical competency of which this exam's out there for you, right? And so if you focus on that, I think that you won't have to worry so much about the pretest side of things. Look at it as an opportunity to take it however you want, but maybe take it as an opportunity to give to the engineering community as a whole. You're going to help future engineers and future emerging engineers have that opportunity to take this exam in June, because they happen to have a big event in October. They can't take it, and they'll advance their career that much quickly as they get this going forward, whatever it might be. So I think we can look at it as an opportunity as well, not just a detriment. Hopefully that's the case. Do you guys have anything else to add for that? No. All right. We've ended our topics for the day, so we'll jump into our last format here. We have about a little under 15 minutes to go through some questions. There's some really good ones out here. So questions from the chat. Ones that I've pulled up that I had. We talked about it a little bit, but one of the first questions we answered live there, that's, you know, that one of the questions was I couldn't access the commentary section of the Steel manual during the exam. Did anyone else try to access the commentary in the Steel manual, and was it available? I want to say it was, because someone said they
So-
referenced the buckling chart.
Correct. And
Yes.
but I do think it was a single chapter, meaning it's 1,000 pages in the Steel manual or whatever the real number is. And it's not broken down into smaller bite-sized pieces like many of the other parts may be. And so it became a little bit more challenging to find information in the commentary unless you really knew your search keywords.
Yeah, I would agree. It's part of a larger chapter in the Steel manual, so it's kind of hidden halfway through as the start of the commentary, from what I remember.
Okay, good. So the commentary does exist. There's a commentary here. I know I mentioned that repeat test takers sometimes have lower pass rates. But I want to say to this anonymous attendee, I know you're not one of those statistics. I think you're going to do awesome the next go round. So positive vibes there. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just generalities, right? So trying to help out to help understand those pieces. One of the questions here, it talks about lagging computers a bunch. We talked about that quite a bit. So let's talk about the diagnostics you get returned. One of the questions here is, shall I expect a more elaborate depth diagnostic results in the future? Also, will the 4 out of the 5 tested questions cover at least one of the materials in steel, wood, and concrete? The second part of that, I'm not going to ask these panelists to confirm or deny what their experience with an exam about what was on the exam. But what I will say is to point you back to NCEES website and the exam specification that has the information about what will likely be on the exam and what is tested during that exam. We're not going to cover that here, or especially and particularly about what was on their exams. But you can definitely look at that exam specification and expect to be in the realm of the ranges of what NCEES puts out there.
Michael, can I jump in real
Yep.
quick? Just because you mentioned the specifications, I did see a question about whether someone can see the references beforehand that they're going to provide during the exam. In that same specification file that lists out what could potentially be on the exam, they also do list the codes, what year or version of code they will be referencing, and all that will be included. So you should know in advance what your options to see will or will not be.
That's a really good point, John. Thank you for clarifying. The exam specification has both the topics of the questions, but also what the references are going to be, absolutely, and what codes they're based on. The basis of the exam is updated every 6 years, right? And so while the codes update every 3 years, you may be on a different cycle than what you're used to, or behind, or in front of. So making sure you know what that exam specification is of which you're taking is important to keep a track of. So visiting the NCEES website and seeing that exam specification for the exam you're taking is very important for you to know. I will take a quick topic. I know we talked about the format. A lot of the questions here related to like the reference materials not being bookmarked in the same way. There should be some kind of uniformity about it and the way that the PDFs are. I don't disagree at all. By any means, I'm with you on that side of things, and I know that amongst this group we've had several conversations about that. Those references in PDFs are owned not by NCEES, right, or the exam writers. They're owned by AISC, ACI, Wood Council, and so on and so forth, right? They're provided to them through a contract to be able to use in this format. So getting them in the right way and how they're provided is kind of up to the provider of that information. So I'm not absolving NCEES of coordinating that and make sure it's right. This is, the soiree, this is probably the heaviest reference material. This is why the last time exam, so the structural exam probably has the heaviest, I'm just guessing, I haven't taken the other exams, reference materials. And so coordinating that is a tough topic. But yes, they will I know they're aware of it and they will be addressing it in the future. Will it be addressed by the October exams in a week? I probably wouldn't count on that. I don't have knowledge of it, but I would think that they're going to be exactly the same as they were in April. There's a question: in California, you need 3 years of experience post PE before you can take the exam. Because this is a national exam, can you pass in another state and transfer your SE license if you meet the years of experience in California? That is the benefit of being a national consensus exam. It doesn't mean that if you pass this exam as your first exam that you would be able to automatically be an SE in California. California is a post PE state. So this exam in a lot of states, each vary due to the Commerce Clause, the Constitution. You can go into that, a whole different topic, but you can't take this exam and then skip over the PE civil structural either. You have to be licensed as a civil engineer in California before you can, and get the experience before you're a structural engineer in California. So if the answer is, hopefully that answered your question, but visit the board, visit the rules, and then yes, passing this exam will help you. We've covered bookmark sections.
Michael, sorry, can I jump in again?
Yeah, always.
On that note, one thing that did change from the pen and paper to the CBT exam format is previously in California, to sign up and take the exam, you had to get your years of experience, apply for your license first, and then once the board approved that, then take the exams. Now the process, they've changed it, so you still have to meet the experience required before you can apply, but now you also need to have passed all 4 portions of the exams to apply. So the same requirements are needed, but just, I guess, in a different order before you can actually submit that application.
Excellent point, Joanna. That was one of the next ones here was, can you take it before you have the experience? Absolutely. The exams are decoupled from the experience at this point. In most states now, it's kind of becoming the posh thing to do. So yes, you can start taking the exams. The minute you're licensed as a PE, you can start taking the exams, and you have to wait for the experience to be able to apply to the state. And then you get to wait for the state board to review that application and your NCEES to forward your stuff over. But you are correct, you can take it. That's a good topic, Joanna. If you pass the NCEES structural exam, are you licensed in all 50 states? I will say the answer to that is no, because you have to apply in each state, and each state has different rules and requirements. So if you're interested in individual state or territory, I recommend visiting that board and reviewing their requirements. But being a national exam, it will help you along the way. Do you have any changes you'd propose for the exam? I'd like to ask the panelists of that. That's a question we have here from Becca. Non-technical changes to the exam. Wide open, and keep in mind this is recorded. It's okay if you don't have any.
Yeah, I think, Jack, while you're thinking there, the one that comes to mind here on my side is the particular to the depth portion and how many graphics that you have to skim through. My ask of the exam writing committee or whoever writes the questions would be to consider, you can still have your scenarios, but maybe having the questions show up a little bit more closely to the breadth portion where it shows a diagram with the question in the same view. That way you don't have so much bouncing back and forth and so much scrolling up and down to find the right floor plan or elevation or anything like that.
Okay, so because of the limitations of the computer, bouncing from graphics to question is limiting. Okay.
I think it's tough. I don't know how you would do it, but the fact that the depth portion now there's no partial credit it's just a fact of how we have to take the test, but it is a bummer. As engineers, we're used to showing our work, and trying to find some way to get it closer to be able to show your work on the exam could be nice. But that's something for the test writers to mull over and think about. We aren't going to come up with the answer in this webinar.
I think probably also be more equitable or more level playing field if all the questions and the depth were more similar in difficulty. Like I mentioned with the breadth earlier, there are some that were like 30 seconds answer and some that were like 10 minutes. And it doesn't seem like I don't think they're weighted differently based off of if you get a hard one right or if you get an easy one right. But I think the questions, it'd be great if they were a standard level of difficulty, all of them.
Those are all good topics. Thanks for sharing. I see Brooke had a question and then she got it answered. Thanks, Brooke. Hello. Nice to see you. What difference, another question, let's just get it real quick. Can you see all the questions before the break? We covered it. No, you cannot, right? Like, so you can see your scenarios before the break and your scenarios after the break. You can't see them in advance. That's an exam security issue. Is the depth 40 questions? Again, exam specification, Rodney, I'd take a look at that. It's the number of scenarios. It's not like the multiple choice for the number of questions. Can you bring water into the exam room? No. Correct. How much time would you recommend for studying? That's a different topic than the CBT scenario. It's going to be dependent. Mayank, I would say that's personal dependent. I would talk to the people around you and who have taken it maybe. I think we're wrapping up the end. Did you guys see any other questions here that you might want to answer? I know you guys are scrolling through them as well. Go ahead.
There's some things about like recommended study techniques, and I think one thing that, given the new format, that was useful is, yeah, that we've talked about a little bit earlier, is getting to know the code sections better and trying to simulate the testing environment of, yeah, I don't use these little calculators much like that. I tested around with that. I was trying to, with codes, tried to get more familiar with how I thought the bookmarks might end up be laid out, and and getting to know the format of them. Particularly, I don't work much with Ashto, so like learning the structure of it, and then when I was searching for something, like I'd go to a chapter. Like eventually, when I learned the format well enough, I'd go to a chapter and try to find it rather than search aimlessly, because as we said, the codes are broken up in different amounts. And I believe Ashta was, each chapter was its own thing. So you can only search within that. So I think getting to know the structure of the codes and trying to have at least a starting point for where you think something might be is useful, since you won't be able to use any tabs that you may have hoped to bookmark in advance. And then not like I also wasn't using bookmarked codes, or sorry, tabbed codes in advance, because I knew that that'd be a handicap that I wouldn't have on the actual exam.
Good topic.
Could I try and rapid fire address 3 of them?
Yep.
One, there was a question about typos, whether they were a big issue or not. I know I mentioned them earlier. In general, not a big issue. All the questions have been pre-vetted. If there is a typo, it's one thing that slipped by. Reading tables, charts, diagrams on the computer screen, it is a little bit laggy, but the program does have a line tool, and I believe one of the NCEES videos on YouTube describes how to use that tool. And so you can, I would say, reasonably read charts, diagrams. The graphics are pretty crisp as well. And then another question was, how useful is the NCEES handbook, which is new for this format of the test? Personally, I found it very helpful. It is one of the parts of the test that now makes it more equitable. Everybody has access to the same resources, especially for masonry and concrete design. There's some really good tables in there to help you do the problems quicker. And I would recommend becoming familiar with that well in advance of taking the test. Treat it like another code reference when you're studying. It is something that you will have access to on the test and be using on the test quite frequently.
2 questions I'll try to address. One, is there any practice exams or anything? Then CES, specifically when you sign up for an exam, gives you an opportunity to buy a digital exam, I guess, practice exam. So that is out there. provided by NCEES. And the second one is any level of difficulty difference between pen and paper and CBT. And the answer is no, they're very similar in nature. The only difference is how you answer the questions, digital codes versus pen and paper, having the physical codes in front of you and just navigating your test taking strategies.
One of the questions I have here too is recommend taking the breath exams on different days. I'm currently signed up for doing one in the morning, one in the afternoon. I think you might be a unicorn. That's an 11-hour day for one, 5.5 hours each exam. And then also most testing centers aren't open that long. So I would just verify with your testing center, making sure that Pearson VUE didn't accidentally schedule you for a back-to-back 4-hour day. I just want to make sure you're not in a bad spot when you show up. Again, that's meeting with your proctor and make sure they're dialed in. Programmable calculator, absolutely not. The NCEES calculator policies on their website, take a look at that. What else you got? Will they share the bookmark structure for the references? No, they will not. You don't get to see that in advance. Anything else, you guys?
Maybe how quickly you get your results.
Oh yeah, how quickly you get results. How quickly do you get results, folks?
So the breath exam is advertised that you'd get your results in 7 to 10 business days after you take it. I'd say that's pretty accurate, if not sooner. For the first round of the depth results, they did say it would take 10 to 13 weeks. I will say it took 14 weeks exactly. So yeah, it'll just be a while. And I think after a certain point, many people will probably reach out and ask for the results if they haven't come out yet. So just be patient and they'll come out when they come out. I think they're still trying to, figure out the exam format and the scoring process. So we just have to be patient, but yeah.
You're on mute there, Michael.
Gosh, I appreciate it. As we wrap this up, everybody sticking with us for an extra couple minutes as we kind of jumped over. Had a good number of participants. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can email the licensure committee, myself or Carl Jefferson here. And thank you to our panelists. Best of luck. I know some of you have passed all your exams. Some of you are still processing through it. So very awesome. And hopefully this information for all of our attendees gave you some commonality that other people are going through the same thing you are and answers a few questions about things. And best of luck in your exam as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm capturing questions.
I think that's a record.
It really is. A record number of questions, a record number of attendees. It was a great webinar.
Yeah.
Are we offline?
No, because if I stop, let me stop the recording.